Hey guys! So, in this video we are going to talk a little bit about identifying the user of your application. So, let's get into it. Basically, the reason for this video is that I had a discussion with my coworker just the other day. He's one of our operations guys, and I'm pretty sure that without him there would be no company. He is extremely good at what he does and extremely important to our company. So we were talking, right? And we were discussing the different panels of our operations setup. We used the Google Cloud Platform, or the Google Cloud, if you will. And being one of those people who've been using both Amazon's, AVS and Google Cloud Platform, I kind of, I have my preference. And so we were kind of talking a little bit about the pros and the cons between the two platforms. And I was saying that, I can admit that Amazon probably is the more senior presence in the cloud domain, and they probably have the great. I don't really know, but they seem to have their shit together, right? They know what they're doing, and Google is not. They haven't been providing cloud services for as long, but they have a really good setup with good services and nice services and so forth. And I said, and the best part is their interface is so nice. I mean, Amazon's interfaces look like somebody puked on the screen in comparison. And then my coworker said something. He said something. Yeah, well, that's true, but I'm an operations person. I don't care if the colors and the white space is perfect. I'm not a big fan of Google Cloud because it's so slow. It takes so much time to load the interfaces and stuff, and I don't care about interfaces. I just want to get my job done, right? And that stuck with me. It was kind of interesting because it made me realize something. What if the people who designed Google Cloud just made a mental mistake when they thought that the interface should look accessible and user-friendly? What if that wasn't the best approach? Because if you think about it, you and I and everybody else who's most likely producing some type of user-facing application, we kind of have this assumption that our user is a certain type of user. In other words, the web pages that we create for web shops and so forth, they cater to a very specific type of user, the sort of normal standard human being who has normal standard needs, right? And so things such as making sure that the design is not right, and making sure that the UI feels intuitive, and all of these like colors and fonts and like all of these things we consider. But that's not always the way to go. It's not always the right decision to make. It's the same sort of thing where you have people who work in the performance space who talk a lot about how important it is to squeeze performance out of your application. Now, I have for the longest time also been on board with that idea, but I'm also a little bit of a conservative when it comes to going too far with these things, because I argue that there is what I call a sweet spot to these things, and the sweet spot that you're looking for is determined by your business need and the user that you have. Let me explain. One of my favorite questions that people ask me is, should I use a CSS framework? Now, there are many pros and cons to using a CSS framework. The biggest issue, I would say, for a lot of people who think about the user performance perspective is that CSS frameworks are very heavy in general. You get a lot of stuff, and it slows down your application. But what if the application that you are building doesn't need performance? What if you're building something that just kind of has to be quickly made, or you have to make it quickly basically, and it's not going to be catering to the common user? A great example of this is Prometheus, the database, or Neo4j, for example. These database systems, they have a graphical interface. Now think about that. they don't care about load times at all, because it's completely irrelevant for them to optimize for to optimize for load times and speed and performance, because their graphical user interface, like their UI, is only viewed by a single person using because the database is the product. The interface is just there to kind of make things a little bit more accessible. And that's exactly how it was for my coworker. My coworker, in this scenario, didn't care that the user interface was nice and that had nice colors and all that. He didn't care at all. That's not the focus for him. The focus was to make him more productive as an operations person. And I think that's something that we should always consider when we're building our product. You have to ask the question, who is the user? What is the needs of the user? Because if you assume that the user is just the sort of person that you will see on most applications, if you don't really think about it, then your technical decisions may actually not be true. I caught myself making this assumption just the other day, which was absolutely horrible. I'm a performance guy, or rather I know my way around web performance, and I know my way around front end. And a standard practice in almost every single application that I've ever built is that you slice things up. You slice out your dependencies into a vendor bundle, for example. And the issue with this assumption is that the assumption here is that the user is not going. It wants to be able to load the least amount of assets, and if we chunk out the different dependencies we have, put them in a separate chunk, and just keep it there, then the user is going to experience one for initial request that takes a little bit longer, and then after that, the bundle is just going to stay there, and the only thing that's going to be updated is the chunk that contains the code that the project is changing, or rather our own code. And it was only by talking to my boss when I realized that I hadn't understood my user. Because he explained to me, well, Frederick, that is true for almost all applications, but not for our application. And I kind of went, what do you mean? How can that not be true for our application? Well, unfortunately, although we have a lot of users, they only use the app every 3 months, roughly. And I kind of went, well, okay. And then he said something. And in those 3 months, we always change our dependencies. If you look at our commit history, that's actually true. And I did. And he was right. My assumption had been that our users were frequent enough that it would make sense to chunk out the dependencies into a separate bundle. But it's actually false. I was assuming that the user was using the application frequently enough for this to give some value on their speed and their load times. But it doesn't give them any value, because if they only use the app every 3 months and we have already changed the dependencies in that time frame, they're going to have to do 2 requests, one for our code and one for all our dependencies. Completely false assumption. So that's what I want you to take away from this. Get to know your user before you make technical decisions that you think is the right decision for your user. Have a great day.